Zahara never expected love to come with this much shame. She was raised by her single mother in a quiet village. No luxury, no big name, just simple living and strong values. So when she fell in love with Tund, a charming man from one of Lagos' wealthiest families, she thought love would be enough. But the moment she met his family, reality hit hard. They looked at her like she didn't belong. Behind their polished smiles were sharp whispers. She's just a village girl. She must be after the money. And then came the prenup, a long, cold document that basically screamed, "You are not one of us." They wanted her to sign away every right, to money, to property, to security, just in case she decided to trap their golden boy. No one asked her how she felt. No one even pretended to hide their disgust. Tun stood beside her, silent. He didn't defend her. He didn't fight for her. He just looked away as his mother slid the papers across the table. Zahara's heart broke a little in that moment, but she smiled. She told them she understood. She didn't want their money. She only wanted Tund. So she signed it. Every page. With trembling hands but a steady voice. They thought they had won. They thought they had reminded her of her place. But Zahara knew something they didn't. Being underestimated was her greatest weapon. And this humiliation? It was only the beginning. At first, Zahara thought things would get better after she signed the prenup. She told herself it was just a test, that once the Adebanjo family saw how much she truly loved Tund, they would accept her. For a short while, they acted kind, smiling at her, asking polite questions, even pretending to welcome her into their rich and glamorous world. But slowly, the mask started to slip. It began with small things. Decisions about the wedding were made without her. Dates were set, venues booked, and even her dress was picked without asking for her opinion. When she asked about it, they would smile and say, "Oh, we just assumed you'd be okay with it," or "Don't worry yourself with the stress, dear." It sounded sweet, but Zahara could feel the truth behind their words. They didn't think her opinion mattered. Then came the insults, but they were never direct. Tun's mother once joked, "You must be overwhelmed. This is all probably so new to you." An aunt laughed and said, "You're so lucky, Zahara. Some girls can only dream of marrying into wealth." And during a family dinner, someone casually said, "Let's just be honest. Zahara may not bring much to the table, but at least she's pretty." The table went quiet. Tun stayed quiet. He didn't say a word. Zahara looked at him, hoping for some sign of support, but all she got was a sip of wine and an awkward smile. The worst part wasn't the insults, it was the isolation. She was always the outsider. Plans were made in front of her, but never with her. They laughed about memories she wasn't part of. Even when she tried to speak, she felt like her words floated in the air and vanished. And yet she smiled. Every single time. She smiled through the pain, the disrespect, the loneliness. Tun noticed. Of course he noticed. But he never spoke up, never defended her. Whenever she brought it up, he'd say, "That's just how my family is. Don't take it personally." But how could she not? Every day felt like a reminder that she didn't belong, that no matter how much she gave up, it would never be enough. Zahara cried some nights. Not because she was weak, but because she felt alone. She missed her mother's hugs, her village's simplicity, the days when love didn't feel like a battlefield. But deep inside, a quiet fire was starting to grow. The same fire that helped her survive childhood, that gave her strength to chase love in a world that looked down on her. The Adebanjos thought they were breaking her down, piece by piece. But what they didn't know was that every insult, every cold glance, every fake smile, they were all sharpening, preparing her for a day they would never see coming. One rainy morning, Zahara received a letter that would change her entire life. It came in a plain brown envelope, no fancy stamp, just her name written in neat, old-fashioned handwriting. She almost tossed it aside, thinking it was just another bill or maybe something from Tun's wedding planners. But something told her to open it, and when she did, her hands started to shake. It was from a law firm in Gaborone, Botswana. The letter said her grandmother, her late grandmother whom she barely knew, had passed away. Zahara's breath caught in her throat. Her mother had hardly ever spoken about her own mother. Zahara only remembered meeting her once as a child, a quiet, serious woman with eyes full of secret. And now, suddenly, there was a letter saying she had left Zahara everything. Not just some land or a small inheritance. Everything. According to the will, Zahara was the sole heir to a business empire spread across South Africa and Botswana. Real estate, retail chains, luxury farms, and silent shares in major companies. The total value? Over $22 million. Zahara dropped the letter and had to sit down. She read it again and again, thinking it must be a joke. But it wasn't. The documents were real. There were names of lawyers, copies of account records, land titles, and a private note from her grandmother. That note hit her the hardest. In her grandmother's handwriting, it said, "You were never meant to beg for a seat at any table. You come from a long line of builders, not beggars. I stayed silent, but I never stopped watching. I built this for you. One day, You'll understand why I waited." Tears ran down Zahara's face. She didn't know whether to cry from shock, grief, or relief. For so long, she had felt small, treated like she was nothing by Tun's family, by people who only saw her as a village girl with no name and no value. But now the truth was out. She was the granddaughter of a powerful, silent force, a woman who had built an empire without noise, without needing the world's approval. And she had passed that crown to Zahara. Zahara sat alone in her room for hours, the letter clutched in her hand, the rain still falling outside. Everything she thought she knew about her life had changed in a single moment. And for the first time in weeks, she smiled, not because of Tund, not for show, not out of politeness. She smiled for herself. She had been treated like she had nothing. But now she had everything. And more than the money, it was the truth that gave her strength. The truth that she came from power. Quiet power. Hidden power. And now it was hers to use, not to prove anything to the Adabanjos, but to rewrite her story completely. Everything changed overnight. One day Zahara was invisible, just that village girl they barely tolerated. The next day, she was suddenly the star of the Adabanjo family group chats. The news about her inheritance hadn't gone public, but someone had clearly spilled the secret. Maybe a lawyer talked, or maybe Tun saw the document. Either way, the Adabanjos now knew that Zahara wasn't just some girl from the village. She was now a multimillion-dollar heiress. And just like that, their attitude flipped. Tun's mother, the same woman who once refused to hug Zahara, called her the next morning. "Sweetheart," she cooed over the phone, "let's do brunch tomorrow, just us girls." She spoke like they were best friends, like she hadn't spent the last few months looking at Zahara like she was dirt on her designer shoes. Tun suddenly became the perfect fiancé. "My queen," he called her now. He opened car doors, brought her flowers, and posted couple photos with long captions about how strong and beautiful she was. The same man who once stayed silent when his family disrespected her was now showing up with gifts and compliments like he was trying to win a contest. Zahara smiled through it all. She let them talk. She let them plan brunches and shower her with fake kindness. But inside, she knew exactly what was going on. Then came the prenup. One night, while they were having dinner at the Adabanjo mansion, Tun's father casually brought up a tiny amendment to the original prenup. "It's just to reflect some recent updates," he said smoothly, sliding a fresh stack of papers across the table. Zahara didn't even blink. She didn't touch the document. She just looked at it, then looked at Tund. He didn't say a word. That was all the answer she needed. They didn't love her. They didn't respect her. They had only changed their tone because she now had something they wanted. A name. A fortune. A story that made them look good by association. But Zahara hadn't forgotten how they made her feel when they thought she was poor. She hadn't forgotten the insults, the jokes, the silence. She played along, nodding politely, smiling softly, acting like she didn't see through the show. But deep inside, something had shifted. The pain they caused her had already done its job. It had built her armor. Now, the same people who once treated her like nothing were crawling to get a seat at her table. Zahara didn't need to yell. She didn't need revenge, not yet. Because now she understood the power of silence, of patience. They thought they were using her, but what they didn't realize was, she had already started using them. Zahara knew the game had changed, but she didn't show it. She smiled more than ever, laughed at the Adabanjo's boring jokes, and played the perfect future wife. She hosted elegant dinners at their mansion, donated to family charity projects, and stood beside Tund at events like a proud and supportive partner. In public, she praised him. "Tund's my rock," she'd say with a soft smile, holding his hand like everything was fine. But behind that smile, Zahara was planning her next move. She had learned one powerful thing. Silence was her greatest weapon. While they clapped for her in public, she worked quietly in the background. She hired the best legal team in Nigeria, discreet professionals who specialized in asset protection, trust funds, and family law. Every meeting was done in private. No cameras, no noise. Just quiet power moves. Zahara started rewriting her will, restructuring her inheritance, and moving money into accounts under her name alone. She registered a new company, the Zahara Legacy Foundation, a future empire built for women like her, strong, underestimated, and unstoppable. This foundation would fund education for rural girls, invest in female-owned businesses, and build community centers across West Africa. It was big, and it was hers, fully hers. Tund wasn't even mentioned in the document. She didn't tell him. Why should she? He had his chance to stand by her when she had nothing, and he stayed silent. Now, she was the one with the power, and she wasn't about to hand it over just because he started calling her queen. The more generous she acted, the more the Adabanjos leaned in. They thought they had won her over. They smiled when she paid for things. They clapped when she gave fancy speeches at family events. But they didn't know the truth. Zahara was slowly taking back her power, one signature at a time. She kept a calm face, but inside she was on fire. She remembered every comment, every insult, every fake smile. And now, with lawyers on speed dial and contracts in her favor, she wasn't just surviving, she was building. She walked through the Adebanjo mansion like a guest, knowing she could buy the entire property if she wanted. She listened to their plans, knowing hers were 10 times bigger. And when Tund kissed her hand and said, "Our future is looking bright," she smiled sweetly and replied, "Yes, mine definitely." The power had shifted, and nobody even noticed. Zahara wasn't the village girl anymore. She was the storm they never saw coming, and she was just getting started. The day was perfect, at least on the outside. The sun was shining, the flowers were fresh, and over 400 guests filled the Grand Lagos venue. Cameras flashed, music played, and everyone waited for the moment Zahara would walk down the aisle. The Adebanjos sat in front, smiling proudly, acting like they had always loved her. Tund stood at the altar in a designer tuxedo, grinning like a man who had won the lottery. But Zahara had different plans. She took her time walking down the aisle, dressed in the most stunning white gown anyone had ever seen. People gasped. Phones recorded. Whispers spread like wildfire. She looks like royalty. But inside, Zahara's heart was steady. Her mind was clear. Today wasn't going to end the way they expected. When she reached the altar, the pastor welcomed her with warm words. Tund reached for her hand, but instead of taking it, Zahara gently stepped back. She looked around the room, at the rich guests, the flashing lights, the fake smile. Then, she pulled out a folded document from her bouquet. The prenup. The room fell silent. With calm hands, she held it up for everyone to see, then slowly tore it into pieces. Gasps echoed through the crowd. The Adebanjo family looked confused. Tund's smile dropped instantly. But Zahara wasn't done. She turned to face the audience. "Before we continue," she said, her voice strong and clear, "there's something you all need to see." She nodded to her assistant, who was waiting near the sound booth. Suddenly, the lights dimmed, and a screen lit up behind the altar. A video began to play. It showed clips of the Adebanjo family, caught on hidden cameras, mocking Zahara, laughing about the prenup, and discussing how they could control her after marriage. Tund's mother was shown saying, "Once she signs that paper, she's powerless." Another clip showed Tund saying nothing as they all insulted Zahara, just sipping wine like it didn't matter. The crowd was stunned. Phones were recording everything. Guests looked at each other, mouths open in shock. Zahara stood quietly, watching the same video for the 100th time. But this time, with the world watching too. When the video ended, she stepped forward and said, "This isn't a wedding. This was a setup. But I won't let myself be owned, controlled, or silenced. Not now. Not ever." She took off her engagement ring, placed it on the altar, and walked away. Just like that, the wedding was over. The room was frozen, but Zahara didn't look back. Her heels clicked against the marble floor as she exited the venue, head held high. Cameras followed her. The internet exploded within minutes. People everywhere were already calling her the girl who walked out rich and fearless. Zahara didn't just cancel a wedding, she ended a lie. And in doing so, she took back her power in front of the whole world. In a matter of hours, Zahara's story exploded everywhere. Videos of her bold exit at the wedding began circulating on social media. At first, they were small clips on a few profiles, but soon everyone was talking about the village girl who dared to walk out rich. People shared her story again and again, shocked by her strength and inspired by her bravery. Everywhere you looked, someone was talking about Zahara. Talk shows invited her as a guest to share her journey. From the quiet life she led with her mother to the cruel treatment from the elite Adebanjo family, and finally to the moment she took control. Anchors recounted the scene, how she walked down the aisle, tore apart the prenup, and played her pre-recorded video that unveiled the family's greed. Interviews flooded in, and every host seemed to admire her refusal to be controlled. It wasn't long before she was dubbed the girl who walked out rich. Blogs and online articles exploded with praise for her. Bloggers wrote with passion about how a simple village girl had sent the rich and powerful scrambling for their dignity. Headlines screamed, "The village girl who made elites beg," and every post added more detail about her incredible transformation, from being treated as nothing to owning everything. Comment sections lit up with stories from ordinary people, many sharing how Zahara's courage inspired them to stand up for themselves. There was a genuine connection in her narrative that made people believe that true power lies not in money, but in taking a stand for who you are. Major brands took notice too. Fashion labels, beauty products, and even tech companies reached out with offers for endorsements and collaborations. They saw her as a symbol of change, someone who not only defied age-old traditions but also redefined what it meant to be a woman of strength. Instead of shying away, Zahara embraced the attention. She used her new platform to spread messages about dignity, revenge for past wrongs, and the importance of financial independence. Every sponsorship and public appearance was a reminder to those watching that no one should ever be underestimated or treated as less. Her online following grew rapidly. In the midst of viral memes, inspiring tweets, and moving video montages of her journey, Zahara became a name known across the nation. People saw her not just as a victim of circumstance, but as a warrior who rose from the ashes of humiliation to claim her rightful place in the world. Her message was simple: you are worth more than anyone ever told you, and sometimes you have to break things apart to rebuild a better future. In the days that followed, she continued to share her story through live streams and social media posts, always staying true to her calm, genuine self. The world loved her story, one of dignity reclaimed, power shifted, and a life rewritten on her own terms. Zahara's transformation struck a chord with millions, making her not just a viral sensation, but an inspiration for anyone who has ever felt overlooked or underestimated. While the world was still talking about Zahara's viral wedding walkout, she was already focused on something bigger: building her empire. She didn't waste time throwing shade or celebrating her revenge. She had $22 million in a plan, and every single step was for the girl she used to be, the one who was told she wasn't enough. She started with education. Zahara launched her first Zahara Learning Center in her hometown, right next to the small house she grew up in with her mother. It had free Wi-Fi, books, computers, and trained teachers. The center welcomed girls from nearby villages, some who had never seen the inside of a classroom. Zahara made sure no child ever felt like they had to stay small just because they were born in a quiet place. But she didn't stop there. She created a mentorship program, connecting successful African women with young girls in rural communities. These weren't just motivational talks. These were real relationships, internships, business advice, scholarships, life-changing support. Zahara personally showed up to speak at many of these events. She told the girls, "Your background is not a weakness. It's your fire." Then came her investments. Instead of putting money into luxury or buying houses just to show off, Zahara chose to invest in women-led businesses. She funded small fashion houses, organic farms, tech startups, and food brands, run by hardworking women who just needed a chance. With her help, many of these businesses grew into something sustainable, something powerful. Zahara didn't just give money, she gave hope, strategy, and access. And all this time, while she was quietly building, the Adebanjo family was falling apart. What no one knew was that months earlier, Zahara had hired a team of investigators and forensic accountants. She had noticed shady things in the family's businesses during her time around them. So she followed the paper trails, discreetly, silently. It wasn't personal. It was justice. Soon, whispers of fraud investigations began to circle around the Adebanjo name. Government officials got involved. Some of the family's accounts were frozen. Tun's uncle was questioned. Board members resigned. The news spread slowly but steadily, and every report had the same undercurrent. The family that once mocked Zahara was now being brought to its knees. Zahara never once mentioned it. She never gloated, never tweeted a thing. She didn't need to. Her work was louder than revenge. While they scrambled to protect their crumbling image, she was busy opening her third education center in Botswana and launching a scholarship fund in her grandmother's name. People watched in shock as the so-called village girl turned into a global force. She didn't just get even, she got ahead. Zahara wasn't interested in being part of old money circles anymore. She was creating her own, clean, honest, and built from the ashes of disrespect. The same people who once asked, "What does she bring to the table?" were now asking, "How did she build the whole table?" And Zahara? She was just getting started. The room was packed. Zahara was hosting one of the biggest events of the year, an awards night celebrating young African women in business, education, and tech. It was classy, powerful, and full of life. Camera crews moved through the room, capturing moments of joy, laughter, and pride. Zahara, dressed in a sleek gold gown, stood on stage, glowing with grace and confidence. She had just finished giving a powerful speech when the doors quietly opened at the back of the hall. Tund walked in. No one noticed him at first. He looked nothing like the polished man people remembered. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes tired, his charm faded. He had lost everything. His family's businesses were under investigation, their name dragged through the mud, and his personal accounts frozen. The same people who used to call him Golden Boy had all disappeared. And now, here he was walking toward the woman he once stood silent for. Zahara saw him, but she didn't flinch. She simply stood still, calm, watching as he made his way to the front. People began to notice. Whispers filled the room. All eyes turned. When Tund finally reached the stage, he didn't ask for a microphone. He didn't need one. The room was already quiet. "I messed up," he said, his voice shaking. "Zahara, I was wrong. I was weak. I let my family treat you like nothing. I let you walk away. But I see it now. You're everything." There was an awkward silence. Some guests looked away, uncomfortable. Others waited, curious to see what Zahara would do. She looked at him for a long moment. Her face was unreadable. Then slowly she took the mic again. "Tund," she said, her voice steady. "You once told me I brought nothing to the table." The room held its breath. She looked around at the hundreds of people, the women she had mentored, the businesses she had built, the dreams she had helped shape. Then she turned back to him and said clearly, "You were right. I brought nothing to the table. Now I own the table." The crowd erupted. People jumped to their feet, clapping, cheering, some even crying. Cameras flashed. The applause was thunderous. Zahara didn't need to say another word. Tun just stood there frozen, realizing that whatever he had come for, closure, forgiveness, maybe even a second chance, wasn't going to happen. Not here. Not now. Not ever. Zahara gave him a small, polite smile, then turned to her guests. She raised her glass and continued her celebration. The moment had passed, and so had Tun's chance. She didn't humiliate him. She didn't yell. She simply reminded him, and the whole world, of who she had become. Not the girl they mocked. Not the fiancé they tried to control. But the woman who rose, owned everything they once denied her, and never looked back. Zahara's story didn't just end, it became history. What started as a broken engagement turned into a movement. Her journey from a village girl to a global icon caught the attention of filmmakers, writers, teachers, and leaders across Africa. Soon, her story was turned into a powerful movie that premiered in cinemas across Nigeria. People cried, cheered, and clapped in theaters as they watched her walk down the aisle, tear the prenup, and build something greater than anyone ever imagined. But it didn't stop there. Schools across Nigeria began using Zahara's story in their curriculum. Teachers spoke about her courage, her wisdom, her patience, and her strength. Students wrote essays about her. Girls in small towns and big cities alike whispered her name like a promise. If Zahara could do it, maybe I can too. She had become more than a success story. She had become hope. Then came the national recognition. In a grand ceremony filled with leaders, artists, and scholars, Zahara was awarded one of the highest honors in the country, personally presented by the president. She stood on stage, proud but humble, wearing traditional attire that honored her roots. Cameras flashed, the crowd stood, and the applause lasted for minutes. In her final interview of the night, a journalist asked her what message she would leave for young girls watching. Zahara smiled and said calmly, "Don't fear being underestimated. That's where your power begins." And just like that, her legacy was sealed, not in gold or fame, but in hearts, all across the nation.